The year is 1919, and the smell of cordite still hangs heavy over the collective consciousness of the British Empire. The Great War has ended, leaving a generation scarred and a military establishment questioning its doctrines. In the officers' messes and the grime-streaked armories, the Webley .555 service revolver reigns supreme, a massive, top-break beast capable of hurling a thumb-sized slug with bone-shattering force. It is a weapon of the old world, a symbol of colonial policing and trench raids, designed for men who had time to master the art of the pistol. But in the hushed corridors of the War Office, a different conversation is taking place, one that will birth one of the most controversial sidearms in military history. The accountants and the New Age tacticians argue that the next war will not be fought by career marksmen, but by hurried conscripts. They need a gun that is lighter, easier to shoot, and cheaper to make. They need the Enfield No. 2, though they do not know its name yet, nor the scandal that will accompany its arrival. The drama begins not on a battlefield, but in a boardroom. Webley and Scott, the loyal armorers of the Empire, answer the government's call for a lighter revolver. They present their new Mark IV in .38 caliber, a scaled-down marvel of their legendary design. They hand over the prototypes, the blueprints, and the years of research, expecting a lucrative contract to follow. Instead, they receive silence. Behind the closed gates of the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield, government engineers, led by the astute Captain Boys, are busy dissecting the Webley submission. They measure, they copy, and they tweak. When the curtain is finally pulled back in 1932, the new government revolver is revealed. It looks like a Webley, it acts like a Webley, but it is stamped Enfield No. 2 MKI. The betrayal is absolute. Webley sues the Crown for £2,250, a fortune in those days, crying theft. The government's defense is cold and bureaucratic. Captain Boys, they claim, merely assisted the design. The courts, bound by the weight of state power, offer Webley a pittance of £1,250, a gratuity rather than damages. The Enfield No. 2 is born in bad blood, a bastard child of industrial espionage and government thrift. As the 1930s grind on, the weapon is issued to the troops, who regard it with suspicion. It lacks the reassuring heft of the old .455. The new cartridge, the .38-200, is the subject of immediate ridicule and debate. The War Office theorists claim that the heavy 200-grain lead bullet will tumble upon impact, creating wounds just as devastating as the larger caliber it replaced. It is a comforting lie, told to save money and weight. The soldiers handling the gun on the firing ranges of Aldershot and Catterick notice the polite pop of the discharge, a stark contrast to the thundering roar of the previous generation sidearms. Yet, the gun is beautifully made, at least initially. It features checkered walnut grips, a polished blued finish, and a hammer spur that allows for single-action fire, the ability to cock the hammer back for a precise, deliberate shot. It is a gentleman's gun for a peacetime army, untested and unblooded. Then comes 1939. The phony war shatters into the Blitzkrieg, and the British Expeditionary Force is swept across France. The Enfield No. 2 goes to war, carried by truck drivers, machine gunners, and officers scrambling through the chaos of the Low Countries. In the panic of the retreat to Dunkirk, the flaws of the gentleman's revolver begin to show. It is a precision machine in a world of mud and blood. As the perimeter shrinks and the Stukas scream overhead, thousands of these revolvers are cast into the sand dunes or disabled by retreating troops. The salt water of the Channel rusts them into useless relics within days. The British Army returns home stripped of its steel, and the Enfield factories are told to work faster. The time for walnut grips and polished blue finishes is over. The gun must become a tool of total war. The transformation is brutal. To speed up production and simplify training, the design is butchered. The hammer spur, that thumbpiece that allowed for accurate, single-action fire, is sliced off. The beautiful wooden grips are replaced with black, serrated bakelite or plastic, which feels slick and cheap in a sweaty palm. This new variant, the No. 2 MKI*, acts as a double-action only DAO weapon. To fire it, the soldier must pull the trigger through a long, heavy arc that rotates the cylinder and cocks the internal hammer before dropping it. The trigger pull is atrocious, requiring nearly 12 to 15 pounds of force. Accuracy plummets. A soldier trying to hit a moving German at 20 paces finds his hand trembling under the strain of the trigger, the muzzle dipping wildly before the shot breaks. The official explanation is that the spur was removed to prevent it from snagging on the internal equipment of tanks, earning it the nickname Tanker's Revolver. While tank crews did indeed appreciate the smoother profile, the truth is darker. It was simply faster to manufacture and easier to train conscripts to just point and pull. In the scorching heat of North Africa, the Enfield No. 2 MKI* faces its harshest test. Inside the cramping, suffocating hulls of Crusader and Grant tanks, the revolver is often the only personal defense a crewman has when he bails out of a burning steel coffin. At the Battle of El Alamein, amidst the dust that clogs every pore and mechanism, the Enfields are drawn in anger. A tank commander, his vehicle disabled by an 88mm shell, scrambles out of the hatch, the spurless revolver snag free against his overalls. He drops to the sand, blinded by by smoke, and faces oncoming panzer grenadiers. Here, the tumbling bullet theory is put to the test. The reports are grim. The .38 slug, traveling at a leisurely pace, often fails to stop a determined, adrenaline-fueled enemy. Tales circulate of German soldiers taking 2 or 3 hits and continuing to advance. The British soldier, cursing the heavy trigger and the weak pop of the round, yearns for the captured Lugers or the few American Colts that have made their way to the front. The Enfield works, it goes bang when the trigger is pulled, but it inspires no confidence. The scene shifts to the rotting jungles of Burma, where this forgotten army's fights are visceral, close-quarters war against the Japanese. Here, the environment itself is the enemy. The humidity eats steel. Leather holsters turn to green mold overnight. The Enfield No. 2 is carried by Chindits and Commonwealth troops hacking their way through the undergrowth. In the sudden, terrifying ambushes of jungle warfare, the double-action only trigger is a liability. A soldier surprised by a barnseye charge has a split second to react. He hauls on the heavy trigger, his aim wavering. If he misses, he is dead. There are accounts of officers filing the hammers of their revolvers in the field, trying to restore some semblance of the single-action capability, or trading their issued sidearms for machetes, which never run out of ammunition and never jam. The complaints from the Far East are vociferous. The .38-200 lacks the man-stopping authority needed to drop a charging enemy instantly. The ghost of the 455 Webley haunts these reports, a spectre of a time when a British bullet meant the end of the conversation. Yet, the weapon persists, manufactured by the tens of thousands. It is produced not just at Enfield, but by Albion Motors in Scotland and Singer Sewing Machine Company, stamped out by workers who were making cars and clothes only months before. A further degradation, the MKI***, appears in 1942, eliminating the hammer safety stop to save mere pennies and seconds in production. It is a dangerous modification, making the gun prone to accidental discharge if dropped, but the desperation of the war economy overrides safety. These rough, grey parkerized guns, covered in tool marks, are a far cry from the polished pre-war pistols. They are ugly, utilitarian lumps of steel, dispensed to paratroopers dropping into Arnhem during Operation Market Garden. As the Red Devils fight for their lives in the ruined houses of Austerbeek, the Enfield is there, barking its ineffectual defiance against the roar of milligram 42s and Tiger tanks. For a paratrooper surrounded and out of rifle ammo, the Enfield is the last line of defense, a final frantic assertion of resistance before the end. The war ends, but the Enfield service does not. It soldiers on into the grey twilight of the British Empire. In the freezing hills of Korea, reservists called back to the colours dust off their old No. 2s. They face the human waves of the Chinese army, the grease in the revolvers freezing in the sub-zero temperatures. Once again, the lack of firepower is lamented, with troops scrambling to acquire American M1911s or the newer Browning high powers whenever possible. The revolver is becoming an anachronism, a relic of a Victorian mindset trapped in the atomic age. It sees service in the Malayan emergency, carried by rubber plantation guards and patrols hunting communist insurgents, where its snub-nosed profile is at least handy in the dense foliage, even if its lethality is questioned. By the late 1950s, the writing is on the wall. The semi-automatic Browning high power, with its 13-round magazine and high-velocity 9mm ammunition, is finally replacing the old wheel guns in substantial numbers. The Enfield No. 2 is retired, sold off as surplus, or melted down. It leaves behind a complicated legacy. It was never loved like the Webley, nor respected like the Colt .45. It was a weapon born of a lawsuit, crippled by budget cuts, and carried by men who often wished they had something else. And yet, it was there. It was in the holster of the MP waving traffic on the beaches of Normandy. It was in the belt of the tunnel rat in Hong Kong. It was in the trembling hand of the radio operator calling for fire support in Italy. For nearly 3 decades, the Enfield No. 2 was the clenched fist of the British Army, a flawed, frustrating, but ultimately enduring piece of history that served, even when it was hated, until the very end. The final verdict on the Enfield No. 2 is perhaps best found in the silence of the post-war armories. While the Webleys were hoarded by collectors and the Colts became legends of the silver screen, the Enfields languished in grease-filled crates, waiting for a war that wouldn't need them. They are the working-class heroes of the firearms world, unpretty, unrefined, and largely unthanked. To hold one today is to feel the heavy, deliberate pull of the double-action trigger and wonder at the sheer physical effort it took to fire a shot in anger. You can feel the ghost of the Tatanka myth in the spurless hammer and the sting of the Webley betrayal in the framed silhouette. It stands as a testament to a specific moment in British history, where the need to arm a nation overwhelmed the desire for perfection, and where a good enough gun had to carry the weight of an empire on its narrow, steel shoulders.